the battle that we've waged over the years, really the signal battle was around whether we could just have a table in the hall and be present and share what we had to share, not impose it on anybody. And,
Mhm.
that was such a threat for so many years.
I'm Brian Henderson, Executive Director of the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, or AWAB. Our mission is to create and support a community of churches, organizations, and individuals committed to the inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons in the full life and mission of the Baptist landscape. In this first season of the AWAB podcast, Voice of the Turtle, we're going to dig into the past while we face the present. The year 2026 brings some uncertainty for our LGBTQ plus siblings and allies, but we've been here before. Across 8 episodes, we're going to burrow our way through some of our history and talk to the people who made it and are still making it. In this episode, you'll hear from Reverend Dr. Randall R. Mixon, a.k.a. Rick. Rick and I met nearly 2 decades ago. Rick, though, unlike few others, has been part of the welcoming and affirming ministry in Baptist life for nearly 6 decades. Some might say Rick has lived AWAB's history, or is AWAB's history. I'm excited for us to hear from him and what it has been like for him to witness firsthand the highs and lows of AWAB's story over a half a century of time. Coming out is a journey, and for every person, their coming out is unique and different and completely their own. For some, it's dramatic and filled with bliss. For others, it's complete with pain and hurt. And still for more, coming out is uneventful and just another part of their life story, like graduating high school or college or moving into a new position professionally. Wisely, my therapist reminded me years ago that as I entered into my own coming out journey, and it is a journey, not a one-time event experience, each time I came out to a family member, colleague, or friend, my therapist said I would be causing each person around me to come out too. To come out because each person I knew and who knew me had to claim their own truth about what they believed and felt, knowing that they then knew someone differently than they had before. Congregations come out too, and this is courageous and hard work because it often comes with a cost. AWAB's mission is to support congregations, organizations, and individuals in their coming out journeys. Whether you're listening now as an LGBTQ plus person, closeted or out, or whether you're an ally, know you're not alone. And know that your struggle and or celebration is something we can share. We'll soon hear from one whose coming out has stretched him in hosts of ways over the decades, through struggle and grace. Someone said, sometimes there's more spirit in a pint than there is in a pew. Would you believe the story of AWAB, or the Welcoming and Affirming movement in Baptist life, traces its roots to a bar in Lincoln, Nebraska? This story, and many more, are told in AWAB's history, written by Delane Tu, Finding a Home Among Baptists. You can order your own copy of this history at awab.org/book. That is awab.org/book. This book and its rich retelling of how many Baptists are welcoming and affirming provides the basis for this current Voice of the Turtle podcast series, digging into the past while facing the present. Again, you can order your copy of Finding a Home Among Baptists at awab.org/book. When I think of an individual who is a pastor, professor, movement maker, and personal hero and friend, my mind goes immediately to Rick Mixon. Rick has been part of the welcoming and affirming story in Baptist life since its inception, and having perhaps more Facebook friends than anyone else I know personally, Rick has the gift of grace for helping many through the struggle of becoming who they are. Largely because of his own journey, Rick has a deep well of kindness from which he draws as he has supported and supports others and congregations in their pursuit of justice, equity, and belonging. Rick's own coming out journey has given him the capacity to minister in rich and meaningful ways. It is a real gift for us to visit with him in this Voice of the Turtle episode. We welcome now Reverend Dr. Randall Rick Mixon, who is an ordained American Baptist minister with over 50 years of experience in pastoral ministry, church leadership, and social justice advocacy. He served as the pastor at First Baptist Church of Palo Alto, California from 2006 to 2020, and has served as interim minister for 6 congregations in California, Ohio, Massachusetts, Michigan, and New York, where he is currently serving a historic AWAB congregation, Lake Avenue Baptist Church in Rochester. He's a longtime member of Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church, Oakland, California, a charter AWAB church that ordained him in 1996 as the first openly LGBTQ+ Baptist to be ordained. Rick has also been involved in various regional and national organizations, such as the Baptist Peace Fellowship of North America, Alliance of Baptists, and the Santa Clara County Council of Christian Churches. Currently, he serves as affiliate professor of pastoral care at Berkeley School of Theology in Berkeley, California. He's emeritus board member of the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists. He sits on the steering committee for the American Baptist Ministers Council, and he sings with the Rochester Gay Men's Chorus. Additionally, the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists currently has 2 annual awards, and one of them is named for Rick, the Randall R. Mixon Award for Christian Service, which is given to an individual clergy person whose work has helped to increase the inclusion of sexual minorities within Baptist bodies and has served to advance the cause of justice by educating congregations and organizations about sexual minority and gender identity issues. Rick, you, Roger Harrison, and another seminarian were 3 Baptists who met in that Nebraska bar back in 1973, where the Welcoming and Affirming Baptist movement began, quite literally. What was it like? What do you remember? What feelings do you recall, if any, that stirred inside of you then?
Well, thank you for the introduction, Brian. I have to write all that stuff down to remember it. Um,
For sure.
but um, I was fresh out of seminary. I graduated in 1973. It was the last annual meeting of the American Baptist Churches USA before they went to biennial work. And we were in Lincoln, Nebraska. And after there was an after session that was, I'm not sure who hosted it, but it was moderated by Norman Dupuy. There were about 125 people that gathered in a room later at night to talk about homosexuality in the church. And as somebody who was in the process of coming out, of course, I was fascinated with that topic and went to that meeting and met this seminarian there, as well as Roger, whom I never met before. And after the meeting, the 3 of us went to the. It wasn't exactly a gay bar. It was a gay friendly bar. It was the gay friendly bar in Lincoln, Nebraska in those days.
Which might qualify it as being a gay bar.
Well, it was good enough for us.
That's right.
The 3 of us sat around the table. I think um, the seminarian and I, somewhat in awe, not really knowing what was going on, as Roger created American Baptist Concern sort of on his own, named Louise Rose as the first president, named himself as vice president. And, um, I often say that it takes somebody with who just colors outside the lines like Roger did, a kind of a really fool for Christ to get a movement like this going, and indeed, so part of the feeling was being in awe of Roger and his creativity and his
Wow.
willingness to stick his neck out and do this thing which he believed in so passionately.
Mm.
So that was really, in some ways, I was really just an observer, maybe a participant observer on that.
Mm.
And feelings. I probably was a little skeptical. I
Hmm.
didn't know this guy very well, and he was creating this thing out of nothing, really, but was passionately committed to it, and
Hmm.
it was certainly fascinating, and I would say I got hooked pretty easily um, by Roger's charisma.
Sure, sure. And movements take charismatic or leaders with charisma like Roger had, right? As I've come to know
Absolutely.
about him. Yeah. And already you've mentioned Norman, and you've mentioned Roger, you've mentioned Louise and others. Movements, not only do they take charismatic or leaders with charisma, but they take people, right?
Hmm.
And one of the things that impresses me is the remarkable spectrum of people who became part of the movement, American Baptist Concern, which eventually became AWAB. Who are the others, though, who quickly got involved with American Baptist Concern back in the early 70s, helping it to grow? What opposition, perhaps even, did you face in those ensuing years?
Well, it grew over time. So it started out very small. You plant a seed in
Mhm.
a way, and those first couple of years, I would say the life of American Baptist Concern centered on national American Baptist meetings. I mean, Roger conceived it as a national movement, and so we didn't gather again until 1975, and I believe that was in San Diego. And by then, he had recruited some people, including myself, who were involved in keeping the organization going. I think Barbara McNair,
Hmm.
who for whom the other award is named,
That's
who
correct.
who for 20 or most of 20 years was sort of the co-leader of American Baptist Concern with me, was involved by then. But there was a man from Lakeshore Avenue Baptist Church, a former Navy nurse who worked as a nurse in healthcare in Oakland, but was a member of Lakeshore. And I'm not sure exactly how he got recruited, but he actually began the Voice of the Turtle. He was the first editor. Ted Weeman was his name,
Interesting.
and Ted created the Voice of the Turtle. He found the James Conant quote that became our masthead, and the turtle became our emblem. And
Hmm.
of course, if you're being really scriptural, the voice of the turtle is really a reference to the turtle dove.
Hmm.
Ted didn't know, and didn't really matter. So later in time, Pat Hunter called us the Turtle People. We were the Turtle People. So
Wow.
there were some wonderful people over those years who came on board. Um,
So did Ted pass the baton on to Daryl Lance eventually?
no, no, he passed the baton to Barbara.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Barbara really the most of the years of the Voice of the Turtle, which was our occasional newsletter, was edited by Barbara.
Okay.
And Barbara was the daughter of a prominent American Baptist clergyman, A. Stanley McNair, who, among other things, pastored First Baptist Berkeley and taught for a while at Central Seminary, and a really wonderful, remarkable supporter, ally. Um, um, she she didn't like so much to be in the front. She liked to work behind the scenes. She didn't like meetings, but she liked doing the work of putting
Right.
the newsletter together and organizing us and working out the details of showing up at these annual meetings over the year, biennial meetings over the years.
Sure. Interesting. That I kind of get that sense in reading Delane Two's book, Finding a Home Among Baptists.
Mhm.
Wow. So just curiously though, for our conversation, Daryl then he picked up the torch for the newsletter that followed The Voice of the Turtle.
Well, it didn't actually follow the voice of the turtle for a while. There was a period of time when AWAB was formed
Right.
in 1990,
Agree.
its roots were really in 1991,
Sure.
and as it formed and became a formal organization in 1993. Um, for a while, uh, we were two branches of one tree, AWAB
Right.
and AB Concerned, and kind of identified ourselves as AB Concerned was more related more to individuals, and AWAB related more to congregations, and AWAB had its own leadership, and eventually broke off and became an independent organization. And somewhere along the line, Daryl was recruited to be the editor of the AWAB newsletter, which was
The
called
Inspirator.
the Inspirator.
Right. Okay. We'll be right back with more of our conversation with Rick Mixon. AWAB proudly welcomes American Baptist Home Mission Societies as a sponsor of this inaugural season of Voice of the Turtle podcast. For nearly 200 years, ABHMS has promoted the Christian faith to impact lives positively. Inspired by the gospel that heals and transforms, ABHMS cultivates and empowers faith leaders across the U.S. and Puerto Rico. ABHMS partners with American Baptists and others to build networks, foster innovation in ministry, and deliver high-quality resources to educate and equip those who are passionate about healing and transforming the communities they serve. To learn more, visit the ABHMS website at abhms.org. Thank you, ABHMS, for your support. AWAB also proudly welcomes Knollwood Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, as a sponsor for this inaugural season. A generous grant from Knollwood's Missions Affiliations and Allocations Committee brings Voice of the Turtle to you today. Now, back to our conversation with Rick. You know, it strikes me as I listen to you share about those who were at the beginning of the welcoming and affirming movement in Baptist life. There were challenges then that folk faced, and over the course of decades, some of those challenges, there was movement, right? And there was hope and energy and some success in terms of more inclusion and affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, in that full circle kind of a way, here we are again today, overwhelmed these days with yet more of an onslaught of anti-LGBTQ legislation flooding Congress and state houses around the country, with what can feel like a tidal wave of hopelessness. How do you stay yourself buoyed and balanced these days, even as you had to figure out how to be buoyed and balanced in those early days?
Well, I think, Brian, it's primarily relational. You
Mm,
know, I mean, there's a sense in which the LGBTQ movement in many areas has its roots in relationships. You know,
mm,
we all know the stories about people who tend to be homophobic or don't understand LGBTQ concerns, and then they meet somebody
mm,
and it changes their lives.
mm,
So certainly it's relational. You know, it's having an organization like AWAB where we gather and support one another and love one another and care for one another,
mm,
and try to work on these issues of injustice and oppression. That's hugely sustaining.
mhm.
And you know, in those early days, there weren't very many of us.
Sure.
And
Right.
so for me today, there's hope in that there is so many more of us than
Mm,
there were in those early days.
mm,
And you know, I know the rhythms of history ebb and flow,
sure.
but there's certainly something to hold on to and hold hope in the elements of the movement today.
Sure, sure. So, you know, yeah, I think that's so poetically put. There are rhythms, ebbs and flows to history. And my sense is, you know, thinking about people getting together, it wasn't always at a denominational meeting, or it wasn't always a business session, right? My guess is there were some fun moments along the way too. So I wonder if you have any fun stories to tell your years of being part of American Baptist Concerned, and then
Oh,
as it transitioned even into AWAB.
yeah, well, don't get me started, Brian. I could go on and on, but
I know.
um, yeah, I
But
mean,
tell us some. Tell us a
yeah,
little.
yeah. Well, the reality was, the battle that we waged over the years, really the signal battle was around whether we could just have a table in the hall and be present and share what we had to share, not impose it on anybody. And
Mhm.
that was such a threat for so many years. I mean, so it's kind of ridiculous to think that all the fighting that went on around, uh, can we just be present and share what we have to share, and you can
Mhm.
decide if you want to pick up the literature or talk to us or not. There were some fun moments around alternate tables and alternate spots, and
Mhm.
when Away came on, there was been some wonderful worship services over the years.
Mhm.
I'll never forget the Indianapolis biennial where the preacher, we held the service in the Episcopal Cathedral in Indianapolis and filled the cathedral, and James Forbes was
Ah.
the preacher, and brought the house down with his story as an ally, encouraging us to come
Mhm.
out.
Mm.
But the other thing that was really important for AB Concerned, and then I think for AWAB to some degree, but especially for AB Concerned over the years, were our retreats, mostly annual, but occasional retreats. And I can remember being in Racine, Wisconsin, where Louise Rose was our retreat leader. She's a wonderful jazz musician, and she led us in music that was soul feeding and roof raising, and
Mm.
uh, that was a wonderful time. We had several retreats in California. Tim Phillips, retired pastor of First Baptist Seattle, led us in some wonderful retreat material over the years. Cindy Maybeck from Old Cambridge Baptist led us in a retreat around storytelling. I mean,
Mm.
there was a lot of joy and celebration. I mean, it feeds that whole notion of what it means to be together in
Right.
community,
Yeah.
and how sustaining and how enlivening
Yeah.
that is.
Go
We
ahead.
did a couple of retreats at a place called Isis Oasis
Hmm.
in Northern California, which included yurts
Oh,
and tents, and there was a lot of playfulness around being in an ISIS oasis.
okay. I can only imagine some of the
Yeah,
fun that had to have been had, right? Yeah, my
yeah,
goodness. It seems to me it's, as when we read history, we tend to read the names of those who led, right? And we tend to hear the accounts of major events or documents or theology. And yet a part of our history, part of our story is these moments where folk just get together too, right? Experience life and have meals and stay in a yurt and be be together.
and play.
And play, exactly. Yeah, and which keeps us buoyed, doesn't it? And balanced, even in the difficult moments of life and
Absolutely.
yeah, my goodness. Well, I mean, you've already referenced this. Voice of the Turtle's motto was, "Behold the turtle. It makes progress only when it sticks out its neck." How would you encourage folk today, and maybe even in this present time, to stick out their neck?
Brian, I've always felt like and said, I think with some probably repeatedly, that the foundation of the work is faithful witness.
Mm,
It's a Des Moines biennial where they were trying to figure out what to do with the four churches that had been disfellowshipped.
mm.
Susan Johnson, who was pastor of Hyde Park Union Church, decided we ought to have a cairn. And
Ah,
so Jim
okay.
Ketchum and I went to the local Lowe's or someplace and got a truckload of rocks and brought back to the convention center and set up rocks. So I mean, there are various ways to do witness. I mean, that was sort of more dramatic. Lauren Ing can tell her story of pausing the prayer while the disfellowship churches carried their banners into the convention hall. And
Mm,
that kind of witness, dramatic witness, of course, is both unsettling and important,
Mm-hmm.
but just showing up and
Mm.
not being willing to go away, to say, as we used to say in some of the marches, we're here, we're queer, get used to it. And
My
and
goodness.
and there's some vital truth to that,
Yeah.
right? It's like
Yeah.
people have asked me over the years, why don't you go to the UCC, or why don't you go to a denomination that's more decidedly welcoming? And my response is, no, this is my family.
Mm.
These are my people,
Yeah.
and I'm going to show up and keep showing up to share my truth.
Mm-hmm.
You can listen or not listen. You can challenge me. You can yell at me, whatever. And maybe I get that from that old logo, the voice of the
Mm.
turtle. We only make progress when we show up.
That's right. That's right.
We only,
Faithful witness. Well, Rick,
yeah.
we're gonna let that be a closing reflection from you for folk today to be a faithful witness. But I also want to acknowledge and affirm again the faithful witness that you have been for so many. And in many ways, the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists would not be where it is today, obviously, with all of the individuals who have been a part of its story and history, some of whom you've named today. But really, I want to celebrate how your part, your faithful witness, has made AWAB be the organization it is today. So we are grateful for you, and we are grateful that you have allowed your light to shine. For as your light has shined, you have made this world, for us, for many, a brighter place. So Rick, thank you for sticking out your neck as you have, and for being the faithful witness you've been.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate
Absolutely. Thank you. Please plan to join us for our next Voice of the Turtle episode when we visit with Reverend Dr. Cody Sanders. We'll discuss with Dr. Sanders how the Academy and the Church can intersect in helpful ways, creating for welcoming and affirming ministry and theologically sound grounding for LGBTQ plus folk and allies alike. That's all the dirt for this episode of Digging into the Past While Facing the Present, Season 1 of the podcast from the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, AWAB. The podcast is produced by our friends at Good Faith Media. Learn more at goodfaithmedia.org. Our music comes from Pond 5. This AWAB podcast is made possible by a generous grant from American Baptist Home Mission Societies and from Knollwood Baptist Church in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. You can learn more about us, AWAB, at awab.org. You can tap more of our free resources, including a list of fully welcoming and affirming Baptist-aligned churches in the United States and elsewhere. That's awab.org. Reach out. You can support us, and we can support you. Check out the show notes for more information. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast, give us a like and rating, and tell your friends about it. If you find yourself needing immediate support and someone to talk to, please don't hesitate to call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Call or text 988. I'm Brian Henderson. Stay encouraged. Remember, you are not alone.